Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 658. I'm Tom Cagley, your host. This week, we feature our essay on prioritization. The order work is done is a reflection of the priority, no matter what the technique that you're using or the technique that you're not using. There is often a difference between assigned priority and the real priority based on when teams start and complete a piece of work. This essay is part of an overall conversation on controlling work entry and answering the question, are we working on the most important thing right now? We also have a visit to the QA Corner with Jeremy Berriault. Mr. Berriault and I discussed how testing is integrated into the Agile Performance Holarchy, APH. Why We Prioritize by Thomas M. Cagley Jr., Megan E. Cagley. The simplest definition of the term prioritization is determining what is most important. Prioritization creates order out of chaos, however fleetingly, by spending the time necessary to reflect on what is most important. In today's IT environment, individuals, teams, and even organizations fail to prioritize well and then try to do thousands of things at once. The cult of multitasking promotes starting everything and then juggling and time slicing to continually appear busy. Busy is confused with effective. Work that is smaller and less consequential is often completed before work that is important. Stephen Covey uses the analogy of rocks, pebbles, and sands in a jar to demonstrate the impact of focusing on less important work, sand and pebbles, before addressing the big ticket items, rocks. If you fill the jar with sand, there's no room for the rocks. There's a video in the essay that will be published on Tuesday. Because what is most important can and will change, prioritization is a point-in-time exercise. In a typical team addressing features and incidents, importance and urgency wax and wane, which leads to the need to reassess priority on a periodic basis. Without an approach to prioritize work, attention will flow to whoever is yelling the loudest, or to items that will provide the quickest hit of endorphins. Prioritization is important because it allows you to give your attention to tasks that are important and urgent so that you can later focus on lower priority tasks. Left to our own devices, our actions reflect our prioritization process. Even if you take work as it presents itself, like the person at the post office or the DMV, Division of Motor Vehicles, where I get my driver's license and car license plates. Dante, by the way, would have added another circle of hell to describe the Ohio DMV. Both examples leverage a first-in, first-out approach to prioritization. Remember FIFO and LIFO back in university? The process of prioritization generates a feeling of control for those who have input into how prioritization occurs and potentially a feeling of helplessness or being a victim for those on the outside, which is why prioritization needs to be a team game. The bottom line, whether real or perceived, prioritization is a mechanism to highlight what is important and to create order in a chaotic world that reduces stress and, when done well, leads to more delivery of value. The problem is prioritization doesn't always end well. Deciding on which work to do when is critical in any job at all levels of the organization. Messing prioritization up leads to waste, which can impact both the organization's top and bottom lines. If the process worked perfectly, there would never be any question about what a team should be doing today or tomorrow. Unfortunately, nothing in life is quite that simple or straightforward, especially when people are involved. Prioritization doesn't always work for a variety of reasons. These reasons can be grouped into 5 sort of macro categories. 1, timing. That includes cadence, setting time aside to prioritize, and falling prey to the tyranny of the urgent. 2, risk tolerance mismatches. focuses on how organizations and teams balance the exposure of having people and resources in the wrong place or accepting work that fails to meet expectations. 3. Prioritizing outside your true span of control includes the planning equivalent of micromanagement and its alter ego, macromanagement, in which teams and individuals exert influence well above their level. 4. No control over work entry. Need I say more? And this describes that all too common practice of having or feeling like you have to say yes to everything in the order it appears. Without control over work entry, prioritization is not very effective. 5. Poor approach, which is a suitcase containing process difficulties ranging from not having a process to believing in a silver bullet algorithm. In simple scenarios, prioritization is a fairly simple decision-making process. For example, do I get out of bed in the morning and walk the dog, or do I accept the consequences? Which do I prioritize, my sleep or my sense of cleanliness? Since I have sleep issues, it's an easy choice in most circumstances. However, if it's raining like crazy or a blizzard, the decision gets slightly more complicated, but not that much more complicated. Every activity is a reflection of priorities at that point in time. Even in simple scenarios, there is an implied cadence every 4 to 6 hours during the day for my dog and a process. The 53-pound dog woofs and then proceeds to jump in my lap. By the way, 53-pound dog in your lap is a sign to get something done. A team dealing with production incidents, enhancements, and new feature development or acquiring and deploying new hardware face a level of complexity that often results in capitulation and adopting poor practices. Each poor practice generates systemic risks. Risks that, unless exposed, are tacitly accepted with little or no consideration or mitigation. Thoughts, comments, all welcome. Please feel free to reach out to us at spamcastinfo@gmail.com. In the next wave on prioritization, we're going to break down those categories, those 5 categories, and expose anti-patterns and potential mitigation approaches. Jeremy Berriault. Hey, thank you for bringing your wonderful QA corner to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
It is always a pleasure, Tom.
Jeremy, since we know that we record in advance and sometimes 6 months later we get the column out. I think last time we recorded it was snowing, but that was 2019. No, I'm kidding. We bounced around. Tonight, we're not going to mention the fact that it's 82 degrees outside and the palm trees are, being blown in a nice breeze right off of Lake Ontario. Talk to me about, the Agile Performance Holarchy, which is a framework for thinking about transformations and something that I've heard you talk about many times. I'd like to explore where testing fits in the Agile Performance Holarchy. And by the way, I'm done saying Agile Performance Holarchy. Let's just call it the APH from now.
Let's call it the APH. That's great. Yeah, because every time I say it out in full, sometimes I get tongue-tied a bit.
That holarchy thing, yeah. I mean, it's an interesting approach to management, but the fact that people can't say it is my guess. It's going to be a hard adoption.
Well, I think it's more just getting used to the wording, but that's a whole other story. So within testing and QA in the APH, the way we have to understand within the APH is that the framework, or like it's treated more, or operating system is what it is called within its training. It's more kind of like that view of how people should have the right behaviors going through an agile process or an agile framework. And from a testing perspective, we've talked about static and dynamic testing before, and that is what, so if we go back to static testing, the static testing component is seen throughout different aspects within how the APH sees different frameworks. So whether you're using Scrum, Safe, Less, even P4, for those that don't know what P4 is, I have a video on explaining what P4 is on my YouTube channel. We'll promote that later. But all the way through, there is a component of testing within each of those frameworks. And the APH provides guidance in some of the behaviors that are viewed as testing throughout different components and different events or sections within a particular framework.
So this breakdown, does testing just exist in one of those? I mean, as we said, we've wrestled with static and dynamic, or is testing part of the entirety? I guess I'm having trouble picturing the model.
So if we look at the APH as a whole, it's six what we call performance circles, and then hold-ons or subsections within each, and they're all intertwined. And as you go through each of those behaviors and kind of have it embedded within the framework, you'll see that, like, even in the leadership component, like, there is a leading performance circle. As you go through that leading performance circle, you'll see components that you have to validate. You have to ensure that your outcome and your behavior, you have the right behaviors to get the right outcome. So instead of actually doing a review of documents for static testing, instead of actually pushing a button to get some sort of outcome, which is your dynamic testing, take a step back from the static testing point of view, and you're ensuring that you're testing that the behaviors and that everyone is doing what is expected to get the right outcome. You're expecting the outcome with those right behaviors.
So it sounds like testing, and again, that's one of the reasons I want to talk earlier in this arc about static and dynamic testing. It sounds like if we really think about the broader perspective of validation, and that things like reviews, things like making sure the process works, things like making sure that you're leading correctly. If you're doing that, you're testing along the way.
Yes. And one of my previous clients, we've worked with that in that model, and I was able to show them the benefits and with those outcomes that came across. And they're actually very impressed with how the improvements happen with little changes along the way. And they, from a productivity perspective, they shot past the moon. They've hit their markers way sooner than what they thought they would with this particular program. So ensuring and testing and validating those behaviors and outcomes as you go along within the framework they're using, and they were using Scrum at the time, and I think they still are, they were able to drastically improve their productivity just with that constant validation with their behaviors now.
Why do you separate behaviors and outcomes?
If you think about it from a dynamic test, so a dynamic test, and we've talked about test case writing before, and like the particular formats I like to use. So the behaviors would be the input, right? Would be like this is what starts the test from running and executing. Your output is your outcome is your output, and then your conditions in that would be, depending on the event or ceremony or what was being done at that time, those were all different components within it that provide you that outcome when you do the right behavior. And if the behaviors are off, or you're just kind of doing it, you're just kind of rubber stamping certain events, like you're like for daily stand-ups, for example, you turn them into 15-minute status meetings or 15, 20-minute, hour-long story review meetings. You're not getting that outcome. So technically that daily stand-up test, so to speak, failed.
But at least you're getting status.
True, you are getting status, not particularly the outcome you're expecting or that should be coming out of a daily stand-up.
Well, I guess we'll come back to that at some point. How do I know if I'm incorporating testing into any framework correctly? I mean, let's face it. I buy that it is truly embedded a lot of places in the APH. I do know that it's really directly called out, the active component of it, in only one of the performance circles. And so that's pretty much like the old CMMI in terms of at least the technical things all seem to be concentrated in one basic area. Even though to do the whole model right, you have to do a lot of validation. And I think it's it's less focused on the technical side than it is the management side. But how do you know if you're actually doing it in a way that you get the right, you get high value outcomes?
I think so. The way everything is set up, it gives you an idea of what to have from an outcome. So if, again, we'll go into the daily stand-ups. The daily stand-ups within Scrum, you have your 3 basic questions to get through. What I did yesterday, what am I doing today, what's impeding me, or what could be impeding me, what could stop the value. And what happens when that information is taken and how it's used by the Scrum Master or by the team to either eliminate the impediments or to make themselves better as they go along. That's your outcome. And yes, in the APH, it does talk about testing in kind of one section. I believe it's in the crafting section.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is instead of explicitly calling out and saying testing this, I think the reason why behind that is if you throw in testing, to me, I think if you throw in testing a lot in any sort of framework and all that, it's going to give the wrong impression that everything is, oh, okay, my QA, my tester, he or she is the one that's responsible for everything. When we should be working as a team, because again, we've talked about this before, quality is a team event. It's not just one individual or 2 individuals or a group of individuals considered under QA. It is overall the team that's responsible. It's the organization as a whole that's responsible from a quality perspective. So ensuring that quality is there, you're implicitly saying, it's like, yeah, this is here's how it should go, here's how it runs, and here's what your outcome is going to be. And I think overall, from a validation perspective of ensuring that things are going well, is how smooth things are going. How are we adapting? How are we changing direction if we need to? How are we able to run through things? Like, one of the big examples I use is like, are you getting those 5 p.m. Friday emergency executive calls because something happened? There's someone's complaining, there's a team complaining, there's issues, people are being escalated left, right, and center. I think those are like the negative impacts that if you see those diminish within and having the right operating system, things should start running smoothly. And that's one of the things physically you can probably see that are showing that to success.
Jeremy, testing in the APH, highly intertwined?
Very intertwined. Very intertwined. It may not explicitly say it, but it is implicit because it is everyone's responsibility. Everyone's accountable for it.
Jeremy Berriault, thank you for bringing your wonderful QA corner to the Software Process and Measurement Cast. Jeremy, how can people continue the conversation?
They can reach me through our website or email. So my website is berrioandassociates.com. Email is jberriault@berrioandassociates.com. Or you can reach me through LinkedIn. We have our company page up, Berriault and Associates. You do a search, you'll be able to come up and contact.
Super. Thanks again, Jeremy. And we look forward to next month when we're going to talk a little bit about that silly stand-up meeting.
No problem. Looking forward to it.
We're going to have to stand up for it. In Reread Saturday news, June and early July are a busy period in my life. This year, more so. Several birthdays, an anniversary, and family visits. This is a long way around to rationalizing why I'm not delivering Chapter 2 of Monotasking by Staffan Nöteberg. I'm still working with shortlists. Chapter 2 has helped my implementation approach, but meetings, part of the business fallacy discussed in Chapter 2, are making it hard. Panorama queues and sessions are difficult after 9 or 10 every morning when meeting heck starts. We will be back with new content next week with 2 articles on prioritization and Chapter 2 of Monotasking on Saturday. This week, we revisit another favorite from the Reread archive, the conclusion of Carol Dweck's Mindset, the new psychology of success. In the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 659, next week, we will feature my interview with Cristiano Giardini, president and owner of Turnkey Technologies. Cristiano and I talked about the impact of using enterprise resource planning packages, ERP packages, on businesses and software development organizations. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?